Nobody kicked you out of your family, which is inconvenient. Because if somebody had, you'd have something you could point at and explain to people. Instead, the invitation shows up every year in the same group. Text it always comes in. And by any measure somebody outside your family would use, you're included. You're fine. There's nothing to discuss. Welcome to the Estrangement Project. And this is where we talk about going low contact, going no contact, the relatives who still call and the ones who never did, and what it takes out of the person who finally stepped back without anybody here rushing you toward a reconciliation you didn't ask for. If your family is the kind that looks fine to everyone outside of it, you're in the right place. What's actually happening is that you've been slowly demoted inside a family that still claims you, and there's a name for it. Some people call it family marginalization. You don't get thrown out. You just stop counting for much. And it happens over years. So there's never a day you can circle on the calendar. You can see it in what it takes out of you to keep showing up. You take the 2 days off work, you pay the $400 for the flight, or you drive the 6 hours. You show up with something useful enough to count, but not so much that you end up responsible for the whole meal. And then you tell the table you got promoted and get a nod before somebody changes the subject. 2 months later, a cousin gets engaged and everybody wants the ring and the date and the story of how he asked. And you clap along because the alternative is looking bitter about it. The money runs one direction too, and you've probably noticed that. You're the one who gets asked to spot somebody rent or co-sign or cover the deposit on the rental house when nobody else had it. So you're reliable enough to be on the list when something's due and peripheral enough that nobody follows up on how you're doing after. If you ever needed the same favor back, you'd have to explain your situation from the beginning because nobody's been keeping up with it. Most people understand open conflict. They get the relative who said something cruel, the parent who crossed a line, the sibling who started it. And if that's your family, you can at least tell somebody the story in one sentence. Yours doesn't work like that. Yours is a lot of small adjustments you made so that things would stay pleasant. You stopped bringing up the subject that made everybody go tense. You stopped correcting people when they got your life wrong. You stopped giving the long answer because the long answer needed too much explaining. And none of it felt like a decision at the time. It felt like manners. It almost never turns into a fight. It just cools. People ask less. Some topics go off limits without anybody declaring them off limits. Your choices get described as dramatic or selfish or confusing somewhere you can't hear it. And you get very good at working out on the drive there what you're not going to mention once you're inside. By the time anybody notices the distance, there are two stories about you. Theirs is that you changed, you got distant, you stopped calling, you think you're better than everyone now. Yours is that you got tired of being tolerated instead of known, and you both might be describing something real. You're just describing different halves of the same pattern, and neither of you is going to talk the other one out of it. The invitation proves a lot less than everybody assumes it does. An invitation is not the same as belonging. Being let in the door is not the same as being wanted once you're through it, and you can spend a whole holiday somewhere nobody was rude to you and still spend the drive home going back over everything you kept to yourself. None of this means every awkward family ends in estrangement. And it doesn't mean everybody who steps back handled it well. Families are complicated and people manage to hurt each other from several directions at once. But distance has a history behind it. Nobody walks away from people who've been warm and mutual and steady with them the whole way through. That's not something that happens. So if you're pulling back, something was being asked of you that you finally decided not to keep handing over. Naming the pattern helps mostly because it moves the question off of you. Maybe you weren't too sensitive or too distant or too difficult. Maybe the relationship only ever worked while you agreed to be a smaller and more manageable person than you are. And once you can see that, the silence reads differently. It stops being evidence that you failed at family and starts being information about what you were dealing with. Fixing it doesn't always mean going back to the table. Sometimes it's limited contact. Sometimes it's a holiday text and nothing after it. Sometimes it's putting steadier people in your life and letting them count instead of treating them as what you settled for. You're not obligated to perform closeness for people who prefer you at a distance, and you already had access. Access was never the part you were short on. You're allowed to stop treating the invitation as proof that the relationship is fine. It isn't proof of that. It means somebody added you to the group text. And if you go this year, go because you want to see those people, not because you're still hoping the invitation turns into something more. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to put distance between yourself and your own family to get some peace? And did it change what belonging means to you now? If this put words to something you've been trying to explain for years, subscribe. There's more of this coming.